Welcome to the 2021 English Festival Insight Session. My name is Shari Della Penna. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about creativity. I really love poetry. Using the book We Rise, We Resist, We Raise Our Voices, we'll take a look at the way the poetry, the essays, and the illustrations all work together. It's an outstanding collection written for our time, but it will be appropriate for all time. It is always the right time to express your dreams and find the strength in yourself to do what is right. Here is a way I tapped into my own creativity. I'll show you what I did and how I did it. Then you'll have a turn too. But first, let's talk about poetry and illustration and how we each can bring out the best in each other. Sometimes it's easy to understand a poem. Sometimes the understanding is more of a feeling, but poetry is always about something. That's its theme, its message, what it means to the readers. When I read a poem, I see the picture the poet paints with his words. If it's a good poem, I feel something too. Joy, anger, surprise, sadness, fear. Sometimes I laugh out loud. Today we'll write a short poem and make our own illustration. So let's find out what a poem is made of. Whole college courses are devoted to learning about poetry and illustration. Since we only have a few minutes together, I'll list a few of the most important and most common poetic devices and common art elements. Feel free to tap the pause button or come back to a slide after you've finished watching. Rhythm is probably the hardest to explain but the easiest to recognize. Rhythm is the beat and pace of the poem. Some poems have a rhythmic pattern that is regular and repeated throughout. A strong regular beat can add to a poem's meaning. In Get On Board, the regularity sounds like a train pushing forward, forward. The fare is cheap and all can go. The rich and poor are there. No second class on board the train. No difference in the fare. Identify rhymes by their end sounds. They sound alike. Use rhyme to help your readers anticipate what's coming next. Rhyme adds unity to a poem, keeping your ideas tied together. Listen for the rhyming words in To Find a Friend by Joseph Bruchac. Look into the mirror. What do you see there? It seems to me that you might view a friend there looking back at you. If someone says that isn't true, here's a few questions I'd like to ask you. Free verse does not use regular rhythm or rhyme pattern, but depends on sound, line breaks, and punctuation. This whole section of Next by Lisa Klein Ransom is one sentence. Putting Father's footsteps on its own line brings attention to this important concept. She grew up in the cotton fields of North Carolina at her mother's hip, in her father's footsteps, sprouting tall and strong among the stalks in southern sun and soil. Alliteration and consonants are repeated consonant sounds at the beginning or middle of a word, phrase, or line of verse. Use alliteration and consonants to create mood with your words. Beyond their meanings, words can sound sharp, harsh, or biting, or smooth, gentle, and flowy. In Prayers of the Grandmothers, Sharon M. Draper uses the s and sh sounds to slow down the reading, while the b's in Buttered Bones kind of pop, like a boiling pot. Onomatopoetic words sound like what they are. Use them to describe a situation without using real words. They may also add humor or other emotions to your poem. In A Day of Small Things, Tanya Bolden uses the words snicker and chuckle to name the sounds a grandmother and her granddaughter hear other children make. Bit by bit, that's how it happens. A snicker here, a chuckle there. Personification gives human qualities to things that are not human. It helps readers understand, sympathize with, and react emotionally to objects, elements, and even ideas in a poem. Use personification when you want your non-human character to be more vivid and lively. Use personification to elevate your poem's mood. Lisa Klein Ransom tells us that hatred beats down and fear blows across her subject's face, not something they can actually do. Hatred and fear are feelings. Listen to these lines from Next as Miss Klein Ransom uses personification to evoke a feeling. The sun rose on a city, budding tall buildings, fast walkers, and loud cars, while hatred beat down on her neck and fear blew in her face. A simile uses the words like or as to compare two dissimilar objects, ideas, even people. Similes can connect an abstract quality with a concrete item to discover surprising similarities. Use similes to emphasize emotion and create strong visual images. Listen for the similes in these two excerpts from What Shall We Tell You by Wade Hudson. What should we tell you when our differences are juggled like fragile eggs that could be smashed at a moment's impulse? And we shall tell you that love, like cream and milk, will rise to the top, and hatred and distrust will be revealed as impostors. When we juggle our differences, we talk about them, call attention to them. Love rises like cream and milk helps readers understand that good feelings are sure and true. They will triumph over the bad. A metaphor is a comparison too, but metaphors don't use the connectives like or as. A metaphor calls one thing something else. Use metaphors as you would use similes to make connections and comparisons and discover surprising similarities. In Kelly Starling Lyon's poem, Drumbeat for Change, she uses a metaphor at the beginning of the second stanza, then explains it in the lines that follow. Together we are a mountain no one can destroy. Having faith doesn't mean we are fearless. It means we believe and press on toward love, toward equality, toward a safer, stronger future. We press on and stay true to what we know is right. She shows us that we, just like a mountain, are strong, long-lasting, and real. Poets use imagery to paint pictures with their words. Imagery evokes emotions and can involve all five senses. Use imagery when you want your readers to experience your poem, not just read it. Your words have the power to create scenes that spark sight, smell, touch, taste, and hearing. Include simile, metaphor, alliteration, onomatopoeia, rhythm, and rhyme to add power to the image you create. Here's a line from Arnold Adolph's Here is a Poem of Love and Hope. My eyes are fixed on frozen patches of past. What image did Arnold Adolph create for you? Did you notice the alliteration in fixed on frozen and patches of past? Everyday words, objects, and even concepts often have more than a single meaning. Symbolism uses words or objects beyond their literal meanings. A symbol is something that stands for or suggests something beyond that literal meaning. You can use a word, object, action, character, or even concept as a symbol to add meaning and significance to your poem. A symbol is usually subtle and not usually explained. In Pat Cummings' poem, We've Got You, she uses a storm to symbolize unsettling times. The parents encourage their children to do the right thing, using another symbol to compare themselves to wind. The storm is coming. There's always a storm, but we've got you. We've weathered the fury you're heading into, and we know how to shelter. We've seen where the storm is weak. We've got you. So tuck in. Stay close. Grow strong. We're here, your wind. And you? You're our coming storm. The parents encourage their children to do the right thing using another symbol to compare themselves to the wind. Just like poets use particular devices, artists incorporate different elements in their work to make meaning. We'll look very briefly at each one. If you would like more information, you can come back to this presentation and click on the heading for each of the art slides. It will take you to a 3-minute video on each element. Line is the path made when an object moves from one point to another. Lines can be horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. They can be straight, curved, or freeform. They can be thick or thin, light or dark, or have many of these qualities at the same time. Georgia O'Keeffe's Winter Road is dark, light, and curvy. Shape is a flat area surrounded by edges or an outline. Geometric shapes are precise and regular, like squares, rectangles, and triangles. Organic shapes are often rounded and irregular. Patrick Henry Bruce incorporated many shapes in his painting. Shapes become forms when artists use shadow and perspective to add depth. When given form, circles become spheres, squares become cubes, and triangles become cones or pyramids. Form is either real or implied. In some paintings, form is implied because it's an illusion, like House 1 by Roy Lichtenstein. It looks three-dimensional, but is painted on a flat sheet of aluminum. In a sculpture, form is real. It takes up real three-dimensional space. Texture is the look or feel of a surface. Like form, texture can be real or implied. Actual texture feels hard, smooth, bumpy, soft, or rough. Implied textures are only visual. They can't be felt. If you were allowed to touch these green plums by Joseph Decker, you'd only feel the smoothness of the paint. When light hits an object, some of it is absorbed and some is reflected, depending on the materials of the object is made of. The light that is reflected off the object is what we see as an object's color. If all colors of light are reflected equally, the object appears white. Value is how light or dark a given color is. Gray tones range from pure white to absolute black, with a number of gray tones in between. Paul Cadden used almost the whole gray scale in After Zmersky. Any color has a similar scale from light to dark. Different values are created by lightening or darkening the color. Space is the area in which an artwork is organized. It is usually contained within the borders of the paper or canvas it is made on. I mentioned specific techniques artists use to create the illusion of three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional canvas. Perspective, placement on the page, and use of relative size also create the illusion of three dimensions. Andrew Wyeth placed Christina in the foreground. She is large compared to the house, the barn, at the top of the hill. Space can be dense, open, cluttered, symmetrical, shallow, or flat. We've just completed a whirlwind talk about poetry and art. When they work well together, each adds meaning to the other. When picture books are made, an illustration usually comes from the artist's interpretation of the words. Usually the words come first, but that's not always true. Some people see the art first and imagine the words to go with it. Some people like to listen to music to add an emotional element. Some prefer quiet. There is not a right or wrong way to approach your project. Decide what works best for you. I used the words of Margarita Engel's poem, All Nations Are Neighbors, to make my own poem. I studied Rafael Lopez's illustration for inspiration too. While I read the poem, consider how the words and art mean more together. Deep beneath the sea waves and high above on aerial flyways, fish, turtle, and birds visit each other's homelands swiftly, while the rest of us have learned to wait patiently, finding our own written pathways by sending slow words of encouragement back and forth, sweet echoes of friendship. In her poem, Margarita Engel shows me that the world is a very small and interconnected place. The natural world knows how to interact with itself, but people need to encourage each other with kind words, encouraging words, and patience. so we too can live together peacefully. Then I considered the theme of the art. When I looked at Rafael Lopez's illustration, I noticed the scene in the water reflects the scene on the rocks, with a few important differences. In the scene above, the girl watches a bird fly away with a message. I considered her reflection in the water. Her hand is outstretched now, as if waiting to receive a message back from the returning bird. Considering the poem, I wondered what was in these messages. Is the bird carrying the same message or something different? Why are the fish swimming in opposite directions? Then I took some words from the poem: deep, aerial flyways, homelands, written pathways, encouragement, sweet echoes of friendship, and wrote them down. I thought about words from the illustration and wrote them down too: reflection, message, aerial flyways, written pathways, natural world, interconnections. Then I took some quiet time to brainstorm. What did all those words have in common? How are they different? What other words did they make me think of? Fly, dreamy. Sky, peaceful. Watery. Wish, blue, toss. And I came up with a poem. Meditation. On my tiny speck of the universe, dreamy messages of peace whoosh unimpeded through the aerial flyways of space to bring home understanding. I used onomatopoeia in the word whoosh and personified messages of peace by making them bring home understanding. I illustrated my poem with a rainbow globe to represent diversity. The heart reminds me of getting along together, and the birds whoosh around delivering messages of kindness and understanding. I used the art elements of shape and color. Now it's your turn. Find a poem or essay in We Rise, We Resist, We Raise Our Voices. Consider the words in your selection and discover which poetic devices the poet or author used. Brainstorm for new ideas. Click on the music note if you want to hear my selection, Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart. Write a short poem using at least 2 poetic devices. Use materials you have at hand to create original art to illustrate your poem. Use at least 2 artistic elements. 5 and 6 can be completed in any order that feels comfortable to you. Return your completed project to Dr. Graber using the link at the bottom of the page. I hope you had fun. I did.